very cool.
And that means Roybit just gets to RSK away, do all the damage she needs to do, and not worry about healing the group. And check out how far
Nice
ahead
little
Sid
rescue.
Spellbook is after these, right? This is ridiculous. 40% of a boss HP bar ahead. And we're a little more over halfway to the dungeon, but still very, very impressive gameplay out of the squad here. They've definitely cleaned up that gameplay that we saw from them earlier in the weekend. This is what this team needs to look like if they want to have a chance of taking out Polish Mountain, if they are able to make it through this series. Looking good for them so far, Max.
It is. I'm curious if we're going to be seeing this team also tank those Searing Quells on our next boss as they're just finishing out those Sun Talon Tamers right now. It is a lot of damage, particularly on a 17, right? That they will need to heal, but it allows you so much more uptime to actually deal with that boss. So let's see how that goes. Of course, no Bloodlust for another 3 minutes, and I assume that lust will be used for that penultimate pull of the dungeon where we'll see them go really big prior to the boss. But that first Searing Quill should be coming in momentarily. Sunbreak arrives first. That someone is CC stunned. Make sure it just gets cleaved onto, nicely done with that Ring of Peace here as well. And Rookron should be casting any second now. So other teams just stand there and tank it, be brave, be strong, and send Spellbook do that as well.
I feel like they're going to be so practiced on this, they'll do it as well. Yeah, they're not line of sighting the Searing Quills. We're perfectly happy sitting here standing in AMC down. Personals across the board. Look at the health bars for them. Unresolved IBF, Scales, and Bruise all being used to tank that damage. No issue for them whatsoever. Health bars didn't even drop for them. Very, very simple to deal with, and that way they get full damage uptime on the boss. And the gap has been opened up once again. 40% ahead on the second boss, now closer to 60% ahead on the third. Sin Spellbook is just not letting off the gas pedal, playing this dungeon perfectly so far. But we do know, like, the hardest pull of the dungeon is coming up here if they opt to go for it, right? We saw Mandatory do an absolutely ridiculous pull onto the last boss platform. It looks like that is a potential make or break part of the dungeon should either of these teams choose to go for it. It almost seems like IDoIT would have to go for it to catch up at this point, so we'll have to see if they're able to pull it off. But for the time being, will teams still have to deal with the remaining HP on Rookrat?
Well, that also implies that they have that prepared, that they know they're this far behind. I'm not sure that is the case for IDoIT, but we'll see how it goes. I thought when you said the hardest part of the dungeon is coming up, you meant that wind puzzle. Because that is certainly the next thing that is waiting for Zen Spellbook, so all eyes on them. And they make it through cleanly. Nice little thing you can do is just wait to get knocked up. If you're a DK, you can just horsey up, and you don't need to worry about anything. Dan is saying, I don't care. We also have a Warlock portal up there, and Sense Spellbook has defeated the Wind Boss. Now, something that we're seeing from a lot of our teams is not actually clicking this Wind Orb, which is relevant to a certain extent, because if anything should happen on this really hard pull that you're seeing right here, right now, then that means they spawn all the way back there if they cannot utilize a rest or expend that first rest and another person dies. So just a tiny little thing to keep in mind here, but did you see what Dan was doing? That was really cool.
Yeah, that was super clean. But I mean, we're just chaining all the way into the top boss room. They're doing similar pull style to Mandatory here, where literally everything is getting pulled except for the two that Dan skipped past at the start for the team. They have a couple mobs CC'd off to the left, so there's a couple less kicks that they have to deal with. But still, this is that pull that I was talking about. Unfortunately, since Spellbook has the second Bloodlust for this pull, just to AoE burst this trash down. And look at what the team is doing. They're doing 600k DPS, and this is with mix. The first 30 seconds, they were just running in combat. So they're both easily doing closer to 1.5 million DPS to chain this pull down, and it dies within about 30 seconds. Unbelievably clean pull from Sin Spellbook. They've got almost all of them count. The boss will be spawning momentarily, and it looks like they're about to cruise to a 2-0 victory.
Yeah, very cool. We're also seeing the same tag from IDoIT. For them, it's Shindig who's actually trying to pull those packs back, then shadow melding them up, rejoining the team with that Wurnstone. Love to see that tiny little min-maxing from her teams, and here comes IDoIT trying to do that same massive pull. One cage is being used on the right-hand side on that initiative, but Spellbook just so much faster here. There's no death differential this time. But there, oh, look at that rescue. I was trying to figure out how we're going to come back for this DK. There's a couple of ways you can get back on the platform. DK usually doesn't have a huge jump ability, so cool rescue tech from Sense Spellbook on the left-hand side there as well.
Yeah, that was super clean. The only other thing they could have done is give him the Wordstone before the facts, and then he could have Wordstone the second he got picked up, but they don't have the Wordstone and they're already off the platform. That's the only other way. Now, that option isn't available for the rest of the fight now, or until Rescue comes back off cooldown.
That's okay,
They don't need it for the
because it's on
Warlock.
Loon. He can just port.
That's
He's
easy.
fine.
Shelly will probably give the Wordstone to whoever gets it next, if I had to imagine, so that they have a way of getting out of that. But they're only going to get a couple more before the end of the fight. And honestly, at this point, they can afford a death. They are so far ahead. 50% ahead on the boss from I Do It.
I don't know about that.
Well, they're pretty far ahead.
A death would be pretty bad. It's 15 seconds, sir.
Yeah, but 50% of a boss, that's over a minute, man. So they're so far ahead right now.
They are, but they would lose a lot of damage as well, right?
It's on Dan again.
It is on Dan this time. Activate Wernstone. Doesn't even care. Is immediately back with that group. Now, Wernstone has also been used here as well. They don't need to deal with much more of these. I think one more for sure, and then maybe that last one we can try to ignore and just nuke boss instead. But very, very fast pace from Sten Spellbook in this Skyreach. I'm just looking up the one we saw from Mandatory earlier. He ended the dungeon on 12:55, which is arguably even faster than what we're seeing here, but Sten Spellbook is going to close that book 2-0 for them.
There it is. Sen Spellbook cleaned up their play from yesterday and even pulled off some innovative strats in that Skyreach. They take the Series 2-0 and they will be moving on to face Polish Mountain in our lower finals. Even so, I have no regrets for cheering on I Do It. This will be the last we see of them this season in the MDI, but I hope that they'll be back in future seasons as well. Now, Zyro, this series might be over, but let's go ahead and take a look at the map. What were our team's approaches like on this one?
You know, it's interesting because I feel like the approaches on both of these maps were pretty similar. It was just a matter of Sten Spellbook being more clean in their gameplay and in general having better damage. Like even just on the single target boss damage, it seemed like that we're generally just a little bit faster. I do think I Do It played well today. I don't think there's anything that they can feel bad about. They played probably the best that we've seen all weekend, but unfortunately, Sten Spellbook was just better.
They were. I mean, overall, I think that play just put them ahead. And so, with that in mind, we'll have Dranos even take a look at this map as well in our last one of the series.
Yeah, I mean, again, you could see from that graph that they just slowly were pulling ahead throughout that mid part of the dungeon. Those spikes end up getting a little bit further and further in Sen Spellbook's favor. Nothing huge going wrong for either team. This was a map that was defined by, there was the odd death here or there for both teams. We had this one actually early on. The first blood in the map was claimed against Sen Spellbook here. So you can see on this first boss as it gets pulled. And then watch carefully here. The Gale Surge comes out. And that one ends up, and looks, so you can see there's those two puddles on the ground. And then the knockback, it looked like hitting both of them. Ended up taking out Worden there. We had a couple of deaths though over for the side of I Do It as well, with the Dreadwind knocking the Evoker off and the Glide not quite being enough to get back on the platform there. So those sorts of things were little mistakes going on, but I don't want to focus too much on the mistakes made by either team here, because yes, the run wasn't perfect from either team. But it was very good. It was very good from both teams. It was certainly an impressive run. It's unfortunate for I Do It. They looked a lot better than they did yesterday. Just unfortunately not quite good enough to stack up to what Sen Spellbook were able to do. This pull they were able to execute safely to the end of the dungeon. And just nice little bits of tech being used. You know, we talk a lot about the different ways that teams can dodge having to kill the ad during the last boss fight. Talk a lot about abilities like Wernstone. There's also just good old rescue here, which you can do.
Yep.
You see here, DK just getting dropped off over the edge, and then the rescue back on, no problem. So if your Wernstone's on cooldown, if you've got it on a different person, something like that's going on, you can always just use the rescue. A couple of other classes that will get you back on as well. None of them are as 100% consistent as that Wernstone can be, but all of them are very valuable to know what you can do so that you don't actually have to switch targets. And yeah, that's how Sen Spellbook end up taking the series here.
I love seeing those little details and things they worked into the run. I mean, it goes to show, right? Every run, even if things are a little messy or there's some accidents or things, whatever it might be, there's still something to take away from it. And I think both of these teams really did give us a lot to take away from these runs. Some Spellbook a little bit more, which is why they'll be moving on. And it was great to see them pull off some of those impressive plays, but they're going to need to pull off even more against their next opponents. So, Megs, can you give us the current standing of our Group A bracket?
Yeah, so Mandatory is waiting in the final matchup. That one is going to be a best of 5, which also means we'll see even more spec bans than we have yet in any of the series. We're really curious on how teams are going to navigate that. Before we go there, we're going to be seeing our lower bracket final. And Polish Mountain had been waiting there ever since their match earlier today against Mandatory. Now, since Spellbook, we're basically not giving them a whole lot of break time to be ready for this run. They had to have that figured out coming into today's tournament day. That'll be like a small little break, and then we'll be right back into the action on who will be the team that makes it to the season finals and BlizzCon.
That is the big prize at the end. And of course, while the prize pool is there, a lot of these teams have cited BlizzCon as being a huge motivating factor for them this season. And like, no surprise, are the trash packs wrong? Are there no bosses? It could be any number of things. So everybody keep your eyes peeled, and we'll get a look at today's dungeon and see if we can spot what's wrong.
All right.
So it's going to be an Algathar Academy.
Okay, I have an
to
idea.
Start off with. Go
Oh,
ahead.
right away.
I think the colors are incorrect potentially on the buff area at the start.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure
yeah.
that the black dragon is
Yeah.
on
The
the
botanic
first spot,
fish.
right? And I only know this because that's the only one I always click.
Yeah, black
I
dragon's on
think
the right,
I'm
bronze is
sorry,
on the left,
but if I think
Right.
that's it.
red is
You're totally
far
right.
right, blue is middle left, and green is far left. Yeah, that's 100% how you nailed it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the
The question
demographics
is
wrong.
that the only thing that's wrong?
Ooh.
I think
like
so. The rest
Yeah, I
of it looks
think that's
accurate, yeah.
Okay. Seems to be
That
it.
was the easy
Okay.
one, apparently.
All right,
Here
now we
comes
get
the
our
hard
next one, everybody. That was the warm up, so get ready for the real deal. Let's see if we can spot the difference on this one. This time it's going to be Nexus Point Zenus, which is spelled totally right. It's totally correct.
Now you saw it instantly. Okay, well. Well.
I was like, I'll just read the dungeon name. Oh, well. That's maybe just one of the things that might be wrong. Okay,
There's
this
two
one is
things
okay.
wrong with this one.
Okay.
I have a guess, but I'm
Ooh, I
not
know.
sure.
Oh yeah,
I
first
think
mark
there's
engine
some
win.
Flare bats?
Oh,
Wait, what?
No, no.
Is the name?
It's
I think it's the
tracks
flare
inside
bats on the
bridge,
bridge.
right? Are all gone.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I see. You're right.
But it might be both. It might be that. It's also the names. I don't read names. I'm a melee player. I don't read. So, but I think it's the flare bats on the bridge that
Yeah,
are
they're
missing.
there.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, okay,
There's
is that
both of
it?
those.
Are those the
There
right
we
names?
go.
Yeah.
Isn't the right boss called Core Spark? So, whatever. You know, if that's all, still. Okay.
She's the core
These are
warden
good.
over on the right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Core
Yeah.
warden. And it's the core defense. So
Wow, we did it, chat. I see a lot of you got it as well. Good job. I see there were little calls there about the tree boss being wrong as well on the
That's
map.
just
So
MDT has it like in a different spot slightly than where it actually
okay.
lives. Yeah.
there you go, chat. That answers your question. But there are our differences. Good job spotting what wasn't right to all of us and all of you. And we're going to hope that our teams, we're going to be able to spot a lot of things going very right for them actually in the next runs because it's all on the line. Polish Mountain versus Send Spellbook. With our lower finals, whoever doesn't make the cut is going home and they lose their chance at that path to BlizzCon. Whoever does is going to secure a place in our top 2 moving forward. But of course, the championship crown is still on the line. Next up, Send Spellbook versus I Do It. You will not want to miss it, everybody. We are coming back from our break just as our teams are hoping to have a comeback from the lower bracket. These are the lower finals, and it's going to be Polish Mountain versus Send Spellbook. So get your predictions in, everybody. Now, with these two teams, it's kind of a contrast in what we've seen from their performances this time around. Polish Mountain coming in and looking so strong and so consistent, where they've struggled with consistency perhaps in some previous seasons. And Send Spellbook coming in with these strong individual players, but struggling to find some of that consistency as they tackle these dungeons. Now, Mates, we have seen both of them in our first dungeon, Magister's Terrace. How do you think they kind of measure up in their approaches to that one?
Not in the favor of Send Spellbook. I'm a level with you, okay? It's not looking too good for them in that first dungeon. The other two, different story. But at Magister's Terrace, we thought Polish Mountain had a crazy fast route, and they were the only team that was faster, was mandatory. We saw Send Spellbook in there, and it didn't look as fast. Now, they also had some missed count, which we will pay close attention to once we actually get into this dungeon today for them, that then added another minute onto it. But even with that extra minute, they were just not as fast as what we saw from Polish Mountain. So if we're expecting both of our teams have not changed their route and have a deathless run, I think this Magister's Terrace is clearly favored to the Polish Mountain.
You know, it'd be hard, I think. It's Polish Mountain. They've just been looking so good now. It's only been a few days into this season. And Send Spellbook, of course, we've seen some great plays like we were highlighted in that last series they just participated in. But Polish Mountain said when they came in to this season that they're open-minded, they're not scared to pull off some crazy strats and routes, and that they're getting closer and closer to the very best teams that are trying to prove that. So, Tettles, do you think with this little window that we've seen of them thus far in the competition, do you think they're doing that?
I think that that's a fairly accurate assessment of their skill. So, like, these two teams, they're the 6th and the 7th seed, or the 7th and the 6th seed, now, depends on how you look at it. And with that being the case, you would expect that they're actually kind of close. From an analysis perspective, I think that Polish Mountain has faster strategies almost straight across the board, but they're a little bit less consistent at being able to deploy them, like, completely deathless or 100% of the time. And I feel like for Send Spellbook, I think that they're a little bit more consistent, but I think I tend to lean towards the team that has the faster peak whenever I'm like deciding who do I think is going to win. And I think that is kind of the big differentiator is who has the faster routes. But there's always this huge wrench in things where you have to think about, it's like, what is the spec variety rule? Like, how does that affect a dungeon to dungeon like setup?
It's true, right? I mean, that is that extra strategy that gets put in there, as well as like where they're going to really have that fastest amp, that fastest run of the dungeon with the specs available to them. And it looks like, chat, you are leaning in favor of Polish Mountain, but we can get our predictions in as well here on desk. So I'll start things off with Makes. What are you going to do?
I'm going to do 2-0 Polish Mountain, so nobody can say I'm just copying.
They're contrarian.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys have to now say the opposite because I'm the contrarian. That's how that works.
Great, thank you so much, Makes. You really set us up for success on this one. All right, Tuttles, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna go in opposition to Makes, or are you gonna roll with your heart?
I'm 2-0 the mountain.
Okay, Zyro?
I feel like Polish Mountain is going to win, but I can never beat Chad if I'm always guessing the same thing as them. I'm going to just go out on a limb and say Sin Spellbook is going to have the hot hand. They just played 2 lights out maps against I Do It. They have some good matchups in these dungeons, right? They looked good in Pit of Saran before the remake happens. I feel like they could have a good Windrunner Spire. I'm going to go Sin Spellbook 2-1.
What is the win case? Like, what is the win case here for them?
I think it's reverse sweep. I don't think they win the Magister's Terrace,
Okay.
regardless of how. I think Polish Mountain would have to make some massive mistakes in Magister's Terrace.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Polish Mountain has looked very, very fast, very strong on that. And because we haven't seen a lot of depth coming out from them, I don't think we've really seen much of any coming out from them thus far. I'd be surprised if they started to stumble now. With that in mind, I think I'm going to go 2-0. I'm going to go 2-0 in favor of Polish Mountain. I'm going to do it this time around. You know, rooted for I Do It last time, but this time I'm going with the Mountain. I think that this is the one that's more favored to win. But who knows? Honestly, I think it's anybody's game in this, and like we've been saying, Magister's Terrace is going to be up first. Now, you know, Zyro, you're giving us some of your insights, but with this particular dungeon, is there anything unexpected, or do you think we're going to see our team kind of stick with what they know in this one?
I could see Sin Spellbook being a team that's confident enough to have a better strategy in this key. The one time we saw them run it earlier this weekend, they made a big mistake where they missed count, and they ended up having to backtrack to get extra count. That cost them in the realm of a minute. So I think the timers that we have aren't necessarily indicative about how fast this dungeon could be. They're a team that has a lot of experience, so they could do something faster in this run as well, with how they know how fast Polish Mountain is. So I'm excited to see how they play this dungeon out.
Both of these teams are eager to measure up. This is everything to them. If they want to move on to BlizzCon, they have to make it out of these lower finals. Polish Mountain versus Send Spellbook in our first dungeon here, Magister's Terrace. Who will be the faster team, Tuttles?
Yep, and we're seeing right off the bat Polish Mountain and Sin Spellbook on very, very different comps makes. Double Warrior for Sin Spellbook here. A fairly unique composition. What do you think the reason for the Protection Warrior pick? We know that Dan, he loves that Arms Warrior. Arms Warrior seems fairly solid. Prod Warrior, it's felt like it's been like the 3rd best tank spec so far this MDI.
Okay, so I just had to double check the Magister's Tears that we saw from them as MEF 1 in their series against Cook is Gone. They played a Brewmaster there. Other than that, the comp is exactly the same. So to me, this spells out that we are playing for map 3 on the side of Sun Spellbook. I think they're trying to protect that Guardian Druid. They might even be trying to protect that Brewmaster Monk. You can do a little bit of spell reflecting on this dungeon, but it's not too relevant, and obviously you lose a lot of that utility that you usually would have with something like the Druid. But it doesn't spark confidence just to the eye check when we compare those two comps, I will say, Kettles.
I feel like playing defensively for compositions and banking on a reverse sweep feels like your team is almost always on the back foot. Like, I feel like that just as an overarching strategy, we've seen it a couple of times. It feels like every single time we've seen it, I've felt horrible about it.
Yeah, I mean, that really puts a lot of pressure on that second map, for sure. But if you can take it to a third map, suddenly it feels a lot better, because the other team is losing out a lot of powerful specs that you then still have access to, right? So it's hard to say. I don't think we haven't seen word out, but Sky does go down here. Sen Spellbook is dealing with basically the second pack in the dungeon, and that is going to make things a lot harder for them. They're trying to recover here. Sky has been pressed, still fighting for his life. Last defensives are running, but no one there to help him out, as Ribbon had to release to try and get back to the group. Looney now running to try and at least get this thing on track here. Portal comes out, makes it so he can run, but this is just so tragic for Sen Spellbook right out of the gate.
Would this have happened if he was on a Brewmaster? I mean, I feel like that is the question that I have here. Like, they're making a concession in terms of, you know, they're maybe not playing their best composition for this dungeon, trying to put themselves in a position where Polish Mountain makes a mistake, they would maybe be able to capitalize on it. But now you're adding a very unknown variable into your spec variety rule, a Protection Warrior that we haven't seen played in this dungeon by your team. is that really the thing that you have the most practice on here? The likely answer is no. And it's just tough. I think that being flexible, this MPI, is incredibly advantageous. And I think that is one of the most important things, is having a bunch of specializations in your bag, but also making sure that you never make a mistake on them.
Yeah, it's a tough line to walk for those teams. I think if you're Sun Spellbook and you looked at that Magister's Terrace, that Polish Mountain clocked in, and you think your route is not good enough to contend, then your smartest play is to play for map 3, right? And if that means you have to protect the Brewmaster and the Guardian Druid because that is how your bans are working out, then that just means you're essentially forfeiting this first map. And I think there could have been more elegant ways to do this than maybe coming in and farming 7 deaths on the second pack of the dungeon. But it's certainly going to be putting them on a real hard trajectory for the series as they are going up against Polish Mountain. Now, I will say the one thing that could still turn this back into the favor of the books is Polish Mountain's route is crazy. You know that. There's giant pulls that they're doing, which to the eye test don't look like they should be possible, but they did them. So there could always be something going wrong with a pull like that. You're never really secure with them, and that is just where we need to put our focus to see if they can get through this unscathed.
In theory, if you do wipe to that pull, they lose the dungeon actually, as it turns out. Because that pull is while the Sim Spellbook wipe was catastrophic, pulling everything into the Galeas room, and if you ended up losing your incarn from your bear to wiping to that pull, it's impossible to actually redo that pull. I think is something that you have to be thinking about. But for Polish Mountain here, this is the moment in time where they need to just make sure that they don't make mistakes, even if they sacrifice a little bit of time. I think the biggest thing is making sure that they don't make I wouldn't even say a medium mistake. I think a medium mistake they still win, but a very large mistake. They need to avoid whites at this point, and they are going. And the thing with the MDI is you still have to kind of play your strategy because you haven't prepped on what does offensive cooldowns, what does defensive cooldowns look like whenever you try to, do an additional pull or you're breaking things up. Things actually can get harder if you don't have your cooldowns for specific packs, and so sometimes going faster does end up making things easier because then you're allowed to press your Zephyr, you're allowed to press your anti-magic zone, you're allowed to press every single defensive and try to just power through this Spellbreaker Runic Glaive pack. At the same time, there is still difficulty and volatility in those things. And Yitte going down for Polish Mountain, he costs them a battle res. They're not going to wipe to this pull, but now that opens up a possibility if there's a death on Kyo or Tankier's on a future pull or potentially a boss, that's how Sin Spellbook gets back into the game.
Yeah, I totally agree. If your route hinges on sending all cooldowns into a pack and then you are unable to make it for whatever reason, that might just be the difference maker.
Yeah.
Sun Spellbook farmed 7 deaths, yes, but it didn't lose a whole lot of CDs with it, right? Their dungeon route didn't become impossible, which would be the case if this happens to Polish Mountain. Now, we're talking on a lot of conditionals here. This is not necessarily something that we're expecting to see. This team has been super clean. We saw them against Mandatory this morning, and even though they weren't able to take any maps from them, they still looked really good. They didn't have any major issues. It was just mostly a routing differential between those two teams. And we know that their routing still is pretty good in this Magister's Terrace. So that one death, I think you just kind of take on the chin. Anything else could be a problem, but let's take a look at Sen Spellbook here because we did see them have a bunch of deaths to this part of the dungeon back when we saw them in this dungeon. Those Runic Glaives are no joke. It's probably one of the most damage output ability in the entire dungeon pool, if I were to mention that.
Royven has 2 stacks of that Runic Glaive dot. I mean, this is a huge point of contention. Like, if you've ever done this Eon Live, if you're not Pug, this is where the HPS check gets real. And even if you're doing this Eon Live, this is very likely your Bloodlust pull. These teams are doing this dungeon on a 17 with, they don't just have the 2 Spellbreakers, they have 4 sometimes in this pull, and they don't have their Bloodlust available for them, which is kind of crazy to think about what level it's being done on and how many of those Runic Glaive dots are being put onto those players. Both Sin Spellbook and Polish Mountain have been able to defeat that very dangerous trash, and Sky is running, grabbing a couple of mobs that's going to be pulled in a Serenal Sunlash. As you look on the left side of your screen, Polish Mountain, they've almost downed and dispatched that boss, and I think that there's only one more point of time. Oh my god, the reverse gate.
That was not. Yep.
I didn't see that. Anyway.
The ping coming out.
I think
a
there's
little bit of
only,
an oopsie there.
so just to set this up, after this boss for Polish Mountain, they are going to be doing one pull into Galeas. It is the last point of tension for Polish Mountain where they have a chance to lose. If they're able to deal with this next pull, and they don't die, basically if they don't wipe to it, they're going to be winning this map. That is kind of the current situation here.
Alright, let's take a look. They have finished channeling. Here they go. Tankirsch is going to be bravely stepping ahead of the team, and it all hinges on the Guardian Druid as they are able to do this pull. There's a lot of aggro you need to hold. Your healer also needs to make sure they're not actually pulling healer aggro, so that can be a very real scary thing for those teams, but they are on their way, and like you mentioned, we're going to be walking. This is the classic Polish Mountain, how much do you want to pull? Yes, kind of style that we've been seeing in dungeons time and time again, because while I am talking, they're also still going, and now we're not going to be pulling one, we're going to be pulling two of those void callers, which in itself seems illegal, but here's everything. For Polish Mountain, no bloodlust, just cooldowns and vibes.
Yeah, and there's a couple of mobs that are very dangerous in this pull. First and foremost, the Tyrant, the amount of damage that's being taken by the tank here is insanely high. He's in that Incarn. He's basically going to be very durable versus. Then there's two of these Shadow Void Callers, which summon a lot of Voidlings, but then they also heal themselves and pulse on the entire group for an insane amount of AoE damage. And that, we have reached a critical mass in terms of our Mistweaver Monk's output. They're just spamming Spinning Crane Kick over and over again, and able to heal the entire party for Polish Mountain, global over global to full. At the same time, this is the only pull that's difficult. You're allowed to press your anti-magic gun. You're allowed to press your Zephyr, your Life Cocoon. Every single defensive is allowed to be pressed here because you know after this point in time, the rest of the dungeon is going to be less strict than this. So you're just multiplying and stacking all of your offensive and defensive cooldowns together because you know that this is the only point of time that matters.
That's right. One big factor here is that heal absorb that keeps getting applied onto Tankirsch. So Kioma needs to really make sure that every single time that goes out, while there is damage coming out from the Void Caller, he's just instantly topping that tank. Now, great news, they have started the RP to actually get Jamelis onto the playing field. And we're just going to be tagging this guy into the Void Caller because it doesn't really matter. We already dealt with so much danger in this pack already that they are just going to keep on going here. Void Caller dropping lower and lower. You'd really like to finish this one off. And of course, you need to make sure those Void Terrors are kept being interrupted. Right hand side though, Sense Spellbook is setting up their big.
I mean, for me, looking at this is just Polish Mountains map to lose. They've already made it through the absolute most treacherous part of this dungeon. Since Spellbook, we know that they play a slower route. Instead of going for the whole enchilada that we saw from Polish Mountain, where they ended up pulling every single mob, since Spellbook break it up to two separate pulls, it is a lot safer of a strategy, but it is significantly slower. For Polish Mountain here, they have a couple of more difficult points, but the difficult points are making sure that these Void Walkers don't shadow bolt somebody, right? And then making sure that they have their CC chain. It's no longer the most treacherous of pulls that are in front of them, and they're going to be having their bloodlust here in 35 seconds for that last boss if they want it.
Yeah, just a massive pull from Polish Mountain. This is why we were so excited to see it the first time that we actually did see it. It seems so impossible. They make it look so easy. Now, that is the big pain factor point in this dungeon, but that doesn't mean that they're super safe from here on out, right? Potentially something could still happen to them. It's not all over just yet, since Spellbook have, although probably a minor chance, to claw their way back here, but it is all on Polish Mountain messing up. That's what they're hoping for right now. They're hate watching a little bit. They're saying, okay, you know what, maybe they lose that big pull, but
I mean,
minor mistakes can
Polish
happen,
Mountain.
and minor mistakes can go into a chain of reactions. It's possible.
Polish Mountain is a full 2-minute boss ahead of Sense Spellbook right now. Like, that's kind of just know that they are a full 2-minute boss ahead. Like, Polish Mountain are on top of the fact that they have 1 minute and 45 seconds of depth differential. Well, sorry, 1 minute and 30 seconds of depth differential in their favor. So they're currently 3.5 total minutes real time ahead of where Sin Spellbook are. So if something went bad for Polish Mountain, for Sin Spellbook to come back, it would have to go catastrophically bad, let's say, for Polish Mountain. And they are going for a very large pull here. Look at that Bear Druid. His Incarn is available, and that is the go button for a massive pull. Every single time that Incarn comes up, in any single dungeon, that is the button that we are waiting for the team to be looking to pull as many mobs as possible, because that Bear Druid, he becomes immortal to pretty much all damage, and then it's about what's going to be killing your DPS. Is anything going to be able to kill your DPS? In this pull for Polish Mountain, it seems fairly unlikely. A lot of the damage that's coming out here, heal absorbs on the tank. You do have some shredders that will leap onto players occasionally. You have a heal absorb that will go to DPS players occasionally, but neither of those things are very dangerous. For Polish Mountain here, it's just going to be it's going to be about keeping their tank alive.
And one minor thing that they do here that I want to call attention to is when they start this pull, the Void Terrors are in a position where they can just line with the pillar. And that means they're not going to be casting for another 20-ish seconds while they are dealing with this pull. That just makes it so much safer, because you just let that cast through, you line of sighted, and then that mob is going to be locked out. Because if you just interrupt it, they keep on recasting. So very nicely done by Polish Mountain utilizing this. We saw this the first time as well. Now just, skipping up with a Warlock portal here. Then our DK is going to be gripping the Void Terrors, and these two guys are just going to be porting up. They have that shadow step kind of ability. So whenever you pull those shredders, they just appear behind you like ghosts from the past. That is exactly how they're going to be getting those final percentages, as Polish Mountain are on their victory lap here on the Gentrius, trying to finish out this boss.
Question, what do you mean by they appear behind you like ghosts from the past?
No, we're not going to go into that.
Okay, the people were wondering. Me being the people here.
I was going to say, are you the people?
No, I am the people. Yeah. All right. Polish Mountain here. Bloodlust has been pressed, like you said. They do have these shredders and void terrors. They just really need to make sure that they get the interrupt kicked by the void terror. That is the last major point of failure. For a plus 17 at 289 item level with players that are at this skill level, this should be fairly automatic. The only thing that can possibly cause conflict is letting those spears go off. And the boss, 57%. Bloodlust is going to be fading here, and this is going to feel very automatic by Polish Mountain. This is kind of what we expected whenever we were talking about it on the pre-series review. Zyro said that he thought for Sin Spellbook to win this series, it was going to need to be a reverse sweep. They're kind of playing towards that. Whenever we're looking at their composition, it would make sense that they're playing towards that reverse sweep. And for Polish Mountain, they bust out to what we kind of think is the meta composition on this season's MDI, and they prove that they have an excellent Magister's Terrorist. Only one death to Yete earlier, and that's not even going to cause problems. It was only 15 seconds. It was only a flash in the pan.
Absolutely right. They are finishing out here while Sen Spellbook is having some more issues on the right-hand side, but it doesn't seem to matter anymore as Polish Mountain is stomping towards that map win. A final percentages remain on the Gentrius, but with no additional mobs on here, there's really not much that could give you any trouble whatsoever, and they know that. They just need to keep on clean from here on out, and that is going to be going into their favor. They need to win one more map, though, to really eliminate Sen Spellbook that are standing between them and the way to BlizzCon, but here's that 1-0.
Here it is indeed. Our first map of the lower finals goes to Polish Mountain, and it's up to Spellbook to even it up or lose their shot at the finals in BlizzCon. So it's
to really eliminate Sen Spellbook that are standing between them and the way to BlizzCon, but here's that 1-0.
16.
Here it is indeed. Our first map of the lower finals goes to Polish Mountain, and it's up to Spellbook to even it up or lose their shot at the finals in BlizzCon. We had a feeling that Magister's Terrace was going to go the way of Polish Mountain, but I'm happy to say Sen Spellbook still tightened up some of their play in this one, making sure not to miss the count. They did yesterday, for example. So, Mix, what do you think that our first map of the series shows about the two teams?
That are at this skill level, this boss should be fairly automatic.
On the Gentrius, but with no addition whatsoever to BlizzCon,
So
but
this
here's
is
that
like a
1-0.
17.
Here it is indeed. Our first first map of the lower finals goes to Polish Mountain, and it's up to Spellbook to even it up or lose their shot at the finals in BlizzCon. We had a feeling that Magister's Terrace was going to go the way of Polish Mountain, but I'm happy to say since Spellbook still tightened up some of their play in this one, making sure not to miss the count they did yesterday, for example. So, Mix, what do you think that our first map of the series shows about the two teams?
I mean, it shows what exactly we were expecting going into this, right? We knew Polish Mountains' run is crazy if they're able to play it clean. They were able to do just that. And we also knew that this was not necessarily the map that was going to go into Sen Spellbook's favor, and it looks like they also knew that based on the comp that they played. Now, the big thing is, because they played such a weird comp, they are now able to ban out the Warrior, the Plot Warrior, and probably the Rat Paladin, or maybe the Warlock. I'm not really sure, whatever they feel like. But that means they have access to the full, strong power of that Guardian Druid, Mistweaver Monk, Augmentation Evoker, Devour Demon Hunter, and Unholy DK that we have just been seeing on those really important keys. And I think that's what has to happen for them now.
We'll definitely see. I mean, it makes sense, and we'll see if that's where they end up going when those bans come in. But before that, we have Dratnos, with your perspective, or excuse me, Zyro, We have Zyro, who's been on Analyst. My notes were wrong. We've got Zyro, who's been on Analyst this time around. Zyro, what were you seeing from this particular map with these two?
Yeah, listen, this was expected, right? Like, looking at the stats on this dungeon, Polish Mountain's run in this key was on average about a minute faster than what we saw from Sen Spellbook, and the comps were vastly different, right? Polish Mountain definitely had the superior comp for the dungeon. That doesn't make the run any less impressive. It was a super clean run, but it was also about a minute slower than the fastest run we've seen from him this weekend. So they weren't really trying to go for anything special either. Sen Spellbook kinda just put an end to it, right, with the first pull of the dungeon. Sen Spellbook actually got sent by the spellbooks in this key, which is kind of ironic. But yeah, I mean, Polish Mountain continuing the clean play that we've seen from them all weekends. They just really kind of look unstoppable, but Mix identified a very important point for the rest of this series, right? Polish Mountain has used a lot of those power picks in this first key, since Spellbook used almost none of them. So they'll have the whole range of super strong tanks, healers, and DPS for the next two keys, whereas Polish Mountain have to start banning out some of them now. And with the maps that we have left in the series, Pit of Sauron coming up first, you know you have to use the Aug Evoker. So if we do go to a Game 3, Polish Mountain won't have the Aug in that key. So Polish Mountain are really kind of on notice. I almost feel like they have to win this Pit of Sauron, otherwise they're going to be on their heels going into the Winter Spire.
You know, I mean, it's definitely where that pressure is on, and especially when we were kind of looking even coming into it that possibly we were seeing something like that with that sort of angling towards reverse sweep, where Sen Spellbook was probably setting themselves up knowing that this first one did so heavily lean into the favor of Polish Mountain. But Tettles, knowing that and kind of returning to some of the discussion we were having about the specs they might pick, with this next map, Pit of Sauron, how do you think that they need to set themselves up on the side of Sen Spellbook for success?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So, specs that are OP in this dungeon. Air Druid, Aug Evoker, right? Like, I think that those are probably the two best specializations. Obviously, Devour Demon Hunter is really good in here, but I think you can get away without playing with Devour Demon Hunter. I think you're looking at the specializations that save you the most time, and I think to me it's like the Air Druid, and it's actually that Devour. So, but Polish Mountain, look at that. They had to make a very difficult decision. They end up banning out the Bear Druid because yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's a very difficult decision. They end up banning out the Bear Druid because they have to save that Aug Evoker. There's not really much of a choice. So now they're going to be on their tier 2 tank, which does significantly less damage than that Bear Druid, like just ultimately. And for Sen Spellbook, that kind of opens up a possibility, especially in a dungeon with as high mob density as Pit of Sauron, where you're like, you really want that uncapped AoE damage from your tank.
So I have a question for Zyro, because Tettles and I were talking about this during the dungeon as well. To us, everything clearly signals that Sen Spellbook picked the weaker comp in order to take it to max 3. Now, Tettles was saying he thinks that's just not generally a good tech. I think we haven't seen it work out yet, but it could be good tech. I'm really curious on what you think, Zyro.
I 100% agree. I think that's what happened here. I think they were just kind of throwing this dungeon because they know Polish Mountain is just a lot faster in this key. But I do agree with Tettles. I don't think it's like the smartest play putting yourself intentionally on that point right away. But like, I think it's their best chance to win the series, right? Like they don't have to use any other power picks. We saw Polish Mountain bend out the Guardian Druids, and they don't have that for the next two maps. And we know Guardian Druid is really, really good in the next two keys. There's mass pulls in both of these dungeons, so I think this is Sin Spellbook's best path to victory.
Clearly they have given it some thought, and they have weighed that this, even if it hasn't worked out yet for other teams, may be the way that they can just get Polish Mountain to kind of stumble when they have just been running at full speed so far through this MDI. Now, each of these teams, it's huge for them whether or not they make it through. They'll be facing off with mandatory, but it will also secure them a place in the Season 1 finals. This is going to be Polish Mountain versus Send Spellbook. It's match point for Polish Mountain. Can Send Spellbook bring it home, Tuttle?
Wow, I hate this call for Polish Mountain. What in the world am I looking at? Like, alright, Loggerboker, infinite time gain in here. Like, we're busting out the Serve Hunter. Like, I don't hate Serve Hunter rep out, and this just feels like it's kind of similar to what we saw from the Sky Reach from Polish Mountain in the first series of the day versus Mandatory, where it's like, alright, this is the comp we're running. We're playing for Sin Spellbook to make a mistake, which I just, whenever you take agency out of your own hands, I hate it.
Yeah. I'm looking at our dungeon timers for the Pit of Sauron because we have seen both teams in here. Now, since Spellbook, they had a really unfortunate run whenever we saw them in here. They had deaths really early and then that killed their entire run and they weren't able to finish it. However, we've seen Polish Mountain on what I would argue is close to the Metacomp. They were playing Brewmaster, Restoration Druid, Augmentation Evoker, Unholy PK, Devourer, Demon Hunter.
Yeah.
I think Yusha's going to be able to live here. Hello? Looked like a scary moment there for a second, but able to top himself back up. And they were super fast. They were only 20 seconds slower than what Mandatory had, which is our fastest locked Pit of Sauron overall. And now we're seeing this. Interesting choices. I would say we have the Devourer Demon Hunter, we have that Brewmaster Monk, but everything else is a little bit different here. Going for that full melee setup, I'm not sure what the consideration here is. Do they also think it might go to a third map?
We got some custom DPS, I think is the point here. And yeah, like you said, they played that Pit of Sauron earlier. They played it versus Sin Spellbook, right? And they beat a pretty good comp by Sin Spellbook. Sin Spellbook, it was the map to yesterday in one of the semifinal games. But for Polish Mountain, their composition is so different that I think that their strategy in this dungeon has to change compared to what they had been doing previously in this run.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm mostly curious about the big pulls, right? We're seeing some of them on screen right now. We also need to deal with that Gargoyle on top of something like a Necromancer, on top of something like the Graveblade, or the Dreadful's Lich that you're seeing on Sense Spellbook's side right now. Those are really the pulls that can quickly ruin your run if something goes awry, because then you send your cooldowns and you need to regroup everything if you're unable to just finish it out where it is. So far, it's looking pretty clean for both teams, and Spellbook a little bit higher on the trash percentages, actually a significant amount higher on the trash percentages, as they are setting up to just take it into our Forger here. First boss, Force and Spellbook, looking like they have,
Wow.
quite ahead on this matchup.
I mean, they were completely sending it just straight to the boss. I feel like they're like half a pull ahead. Yeah, maybe a full pull ahead at this point too. And look at this. Not even with the Incarn here. For Sin Spellbook, I'm actually a little bit worried about Sky's ability to be able to live this much trash on top of the boss. At the same time, he did press his Survival Instincts. He is able to rotate to his Barkskin. If the trash is killed off by the time this Barkskin fades, he's going to be okay. Anything past that, and we're a little bit concerned about Sky's ability to be able to live. Ooh, Looney getting picked up by that Plunge Talon Gargoyle, and the Gargoyle not in melee range of the entire pack. That can actually be a decent amount of damage that is lost onto that Gargoyle, because you realistically want to be hitting Garfrost the entire time. If that targeted Dan or potentially even Roybin, that is a much better target for that kind of ability. And this is actually looking very scary for Sin Spellbook here. If they're able to get through this pull, it will be great. At the same time, they're still not done with the trash. Sky has now rotated to his Incarn and his second Barkskin of this pull.
Here comes that plunge. Need to make sure that that shield is broken, but they're doing a great job of it. And that Gargoyle will be falling momentarily, is down now. The good thing about Garfrost is just you can spend a long time here, right? if you play those stones correctly, you don't put them in like really, really awful spots, you can elongate the spike or very, very long, as there's nothing that's like doing a really big area of denial or doing like a big overtime rot. So that's a really good boss to pull something onto. We're now seeing Polish Mountain arrive at the same part of the dungeon. We're expecting them to also take it into boss here, but are we not? Are we just going to do it like this? Polish Mountain looks like
Vanilla.
to just finish this full natty.
The whole W. We thought that we were going to be playing high key pushing. In fact, we are, Max. We're seeing the a vanilla round here coming in for Polish Mountain. This is notably.
Okay, come on. He's running. We're on our way.
This is not the route they have been playing. Like this is why Makes is also caught off a little bit off guard, is because it is such a different route compared to what they had previously planned in this dungeon.
It's very interesting, I will say.
Yeah, that's how you know she does not like it.
I do not like it. I hate it, actually. I think it's awful. But Polish Mountain, I think they were just waiting for a defensive that must have been it on Tankiers to be able to add in that second pack before they can go up to Garfrost. But they were already behind on the pacing of this dungeon. And that just cost them another, what, like 30 seconds maybe? 20 seconds if you're generous? So it's really not where you would want to be. I'm very curious on what exactly Polish Mountain's plan is.
I mean, it's for picks for the last map, but...
But, like, you could have ended it here. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, they're 2 minutes behind. The point that you're making, which I think the audience needs to understand, is they're right now 2 minutes behind on Garfrost. Like that, they are already a manufactured 2 minutes behind in a map that they won yesterday in a semifinal.
I know. So, if you're Polish Mountain, you would have had to go into the series, look at the Magister's Terrace from Sun Spellbook, look at your own Magister's Terrace and say, okay, I think we got this.
Yeah.
Then you compare the Pit of Sarons and you go, okay, theirs was really kind of unfortunate in a way. We don't really know what their real dungeon run looks like, but we expect it to be fast.
Okay.
And then maybe get scared and think they could take this Pit of Saron. And so what Polish Mountain ended up doing is protecting their best comm for that third map, which is the same thing we saw from Sun Spellbook in map 1. So both of our teams have now effectively played a worse comp than they needed to in one team map 1, one team map 2, to bring it all to map 3.
Yes.
There's no other way to describe what we're seeing from Polish Mountain. This is not their best. This is not their best route. We've seen them do much better. It's not due to deaths. It's just a general difference in how they're approaching this dungeon.
Precisely, and I think that the easiest way to describe it is risky, right? They're putting themselves in a position where they're playing a clean map. The only thing that the only way they actually take down this series 2-0 right now is by banking on Sin's Spellbook losing. But they have so many protected picks for the last map that they believe that the protected picks would automatically guarantee them a win in map 3. It's very risky because it just feels like you're almost conceding a map in a 3-map series, but I think it's an evolution of the spec variety rule, and I think that the spec variety rule has added a lot of really cool texture. Now you see this on the right side, Sin Spellbook, they played kind of a similar strategy in map 1 and Magister's Terrace. They assessed the situation from a meta perspective. What does the Magister's Terrace look like compared to Polish Mountains? Okay, we think our Magister's Terrace is a little bit worse. We're going to protect future picks by playing something that's maybe a tier 2 or tier 3 composition. We're going to try to play our best version of the map. And if things go our way, we'll be able to take that map. We're just going to try to put ourselves in the best position possible, but we're not going to see the fastest run out of that team. But for Sin Spellbook on the right side, in map 2, they have to be able to convert once they are on those meta picks. And look at this. They have been playing an incredibly quick Pit of Saron so far.
Yeah, absolutely. A really, really nice showing from Sin Spellbook thus far. Now, this is a scary boss that we've seen teams on, and I'm curious, it looks like we're not actually moving to the shades that are outside. So this is something we saw from Mandatory, where they just elected to full send into boss, and Sin Spellbook is doing the same thing. They're just saying, we don't need to deal with those shades of crick. If we can just kill, it can crick before they become a problem. cast you're looking for, I believe, is the get 'em ick, right? That's the one that we cannot get to. They will need to finish this boss before that arrives.
Yeah, the shades immediately start casting shade detonation or something, right? Something that's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
you're wiping basically is what the cast is entailing. So since Spellbook on the right hand side, they have down the second boss of this dungeon. A fast pit of Sauron time is around the 14 to 14:30 marker. How are you feeling about Sin Spellbook's ability to be able to time the dungeon that quickly here, Makes?
That's a good question. Let me look at the boss timers that we did see in the Pit of Sauron from Mandatory. So it was 6 minutes 35 on that first boss, which sent Spellbook under by a significant amount. They locked in 550, and then it was 11:05. It was 10:08 for Mandatory on that second boss, which, if you add up the both numbers that we see at the bottom there, said Spellbook is actually flooring it. So we might see a really, really fast Sauron here, maybe a potential new best.
I would not be shocked if they actually lost this pull. This pull is incredibly dangerous. Obviously, Bloodlust tends to be better from like a damage efficiency perspective, like on a boss, because it's actually a lot harder to get more single target damage than it is to get AoE damage out a lot of the times. But I think with a pull like this, you could have justified pressing that Bloodlust on cooldown as it came up. Like, since Spellbook actually elects to hold on to it though, and not press it on this Glacier, thinking that they have enough defensives and offensive abilities to be able to just power through all these rotting ghouls leaping on the players. The Chilpin Cold Wraith's applying like a snare. The Lich is pulsing AoE, and Sky on that tank is taking insane amounts of damage from the Grave Blades. The fact that Sin Spellbook was able to full send it into this mini boss, and they don't actually have to lust this pull, was very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. In the meantime, I was just looking at our spec fans and double checking what teams potentially have available, as it very much looks like we might be going into map 3. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but it's highly, highly interesting stuff. As Sin Spellbook is on the final way here, we'll be seeing them add in the trash that is standing downstairs. A lot of teams have been doing this, Tuddles, but I'm seeing an offline tack on Looney up there.
No.
That is not good news. Let's hope that this is just a quick little reload or something.
The Sky's going to be tagging these mobs. He's going to warn.
Here comes that Warnstone.
Bang. And now these mobs are going to run up the hill. And Looney's going to reconnect to the game now. Now. He's gonna reconnect now.
I don't think
Where's
it's working.
Looney?
Please.
Anybody look for Looney? Guys, everybody, please check.
Can somebody summon my demon hunter? I need him. He's gonna reconnect right now.
Oh no!
Okay, so this is the win con for Polish Mountain. They play a slow, steady route. This is the tale of the tortoise and the hare. Did they have those? Did they have that story in Germany?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
So the tortoise and the hare,
one.
a tried and true tale where the team that's going slower but more consistent at a consistent pace
He's back, he's back.
can catch up to the hare.
Looney's back.
Whenever you
We don't care
whenever you
about the hair
disconnect
anymore.
the
Go
hare,
Zen Spellbook.
whenever you
They got it.
disconnect
They're
the
back.
hare,
Looney is on his way, and that means Scourge Lord Tyrannus has been pulled. Fear not, for the group has found themselves back together again. Bloodlust has been used by Zen Spellbook. From here on out, it's just play it clean, and you can get this map back in your favor, equalize the score, and take it all to a third map for those lower bracket finals. A chance to make it all the way to the season finals for each of these teams. Zen Spellbook is looking to be on top of this one. Trash has died. It's only the boss that's standing between them and victory.
Okay. The fact that they were like 2.5 minutes ahead and tanked a DC in the middle of their run is sick.
That was so scary.
Yeah, that was about a minute away from being very, very sad.
Absolutely scary stuff. Let's hope Looney has it figured out. In the previous run, in the Siege, we also saw a disconnect on Zen Spellbook, but I believe it was Dan. So I don't know
Yes,
what's
it
happening
was Dan.
for this team. This morning, Sky lost his monitor. They just even cursed. I don't know who did it, but somebody has cursed one of our teams. just weird stuff for them as they are getting Scourge Lord Tyrannus lower and lower. Anti-magic zone deployed here to help with the incoming damage, allowing Royven to just also do a little bit more damage herself. We need to play one more set of those circles to deal with, but this is going to look really, really good for them. I will say, look at Polish Mountain. They have accelerated as well. They're also on the 100% trash count. Using that lust, it's still running. We're going to be getting a good one. If it had been one or two dash on the other side of the team, it might have been a very different story here. But the way it stands, it shall be written. Ascend Spellbook are going to be clawing back this bit of run and take the map or the series to a third map.
They are, and I mean, we see that victory coming in right now.
59 seconds.
Having both of our teams taking some risks in this map, expected or otherwise, but Ascend Spellbook coming out on top here. They've evened that scoreboard 1-1, and we will be seeing that third map, which will determine it all. Now, Polish Mountain picked a very different route from what they've played before, and I know that Tettles and Makes were both very confused by this, so it might have been to preserve picks like we were talking about, but Tettles, how do you think this...
It has to be.
100%. Okay, all right. But how do you think it played out for them, Tettles? Do you think this was the way to go now that we're all through it?
I mean, okay, there's no good way to have your best comp or something close to your best comp for 3 maps. That's kind of the importance of the spec variety rule. To me, whenever you're up 1-0, I feel like in my mind, I would be more willing to try to like play towards, just being able to take it down 2-0. Since Spellbook, Looney was literally disconnected for a minute, maybe more. They might have been able to put up the fastest Pit of Sauron on the weekend, which if you're Polish Mountain and you think that you would have lost this Pit of Sauron regardless, it's kind of a smart decision then to basically take a mulligan on the second map and then play for the third map. It just feels so bad to be like, all right, we're going to play this composition that's 2.5 minutes behind, because if they played their best comp in Looney DCs, they might win.
Yeah, it's not exactly what you want to see happen, but, it is interesting with the spec variety rule how the teams are trying to play around this or outsmart one another. So, I mean, Zyro, we've heard Tettle's opinion, Makes his thoughts on it, but Zyro, what were your thoughts going through this one?
Listen, the teams are mind gaming each other right now, swapping their comps around just to make sure that they have the best comps available for the last key, which is really interesting when you look at this dungeon in general, right? Looking at the times across the weekend in Pit of Sauron, Polish Mountain have the second fastest run. They're only about 20 seconds behind mandatory. So, if they really thought that they had a good chance of winning this key, they could have gone for it, but it looks like they're really intent on saving the Augurevoker and DK for Windrunner's Spire because they weren't confident in their comp that they had available for them after playing the Magister's Terrace. It's really, really interesting. This spec ban rule is playing out a lot more interesting than I thought it would initially. They played an entirely different comp in this key just so they could keep that Aug and DK available for Windrunner's Spire, whereas since Spellbook, they went for the full, tier 1 DPS, tier 1 tank healer combo for this key, and it played out really well for them. If they didn't actually have that DC from Looney, I think they were actually on pace to potentially set the record for this dungeon for the entire weekend, right? The fastest run we've seen was mandatory at 14:19. Since Spellbook were on pace to pull the last boss at about 12 minutes. So they were right in the range of that, which is crazy good. The question is, what are these teams going to bring to Windrunner's Spire? We've seen so many different interesting picks in that key. Rogue looks really strong, and I know Shelly's played Rogue in the past. He could pull that out really easily. Shrub looks strong in that key for skips to do mass pulls on top of Emberdawn or the Derelict duo. It's shaping up to be a really, really interesting series.
It really is. Honestly, I love seeing these two go head to head. I think we wouldn't have necessarily expected it from some of Spellbook's plays this weekend, but we knew they had the potential. Now they really are standing up against Polish Mountain. And thinking about that next map and the picks that we have you were talking about ghosts while you were casting the last map, and our next map, Windrunner, actually has
the previous map.
2 maps ago. All right. Well, this one has a lot of ghosts. Windrunner Spire. But do you think that either team has an advantage going up against these spooky haunts?
Yeah, so I was looking at the spec bans, right? Because there's been a couple of theories on what exactly that was and how that worked out. But the true story is both of the teams have access to what we consider the royal DPS comms. So unless they found it out right now, No, should all be good. So we should have the Augmentation Evoker, we should have that the Pharaoh Demon Hunter and that Unholy DK for all teams. What we won't have is the Guardian Druid on both sides, and then Polish Mountain is also losing out on that Mistweaver Monk as they banned it in map 1, or after map 1. So that is how those runs are going to look like. And we have seen one of her teams in Windrunner Spire already. That was in Spellbook, and they were playing around an Arms Warrior and a Retribution Paladin whenever we saw them in there. That is very interesting stuff. And I'm curious on how that is going to pair up, because that was also their first map, so they didn't have any bans leading.
Yeah, so something that makes us talking about that was important. A lot of it was about the spec variety rule, but I think the most important thing actually was the fact that since Spellbook has already played this map, and it's the first map that they were playing this MPI against Firmawand, which would in theory, you would extrapolate to think that they have practiced that dungeon a lot more than some of the other competition, right? Like that, you'd be like, okay, we're for sure playing Windrunner Spire, 100%. It's the first map that we're going to be playing. We're going to practice this with a bunch of different compositions, and I feel like they should have an edge there.
Falling into end of final, their future certainly. Here we go, Kettles.
Yep, and we got that God comp that makes us talk about for DPS for both of these teams, the DK, that Demon Hunter, and that Augmentation Evoker. Are there going to be any unique Wernstone kind of pulling or skips available to these teams in this Windrunner Spire? It's hard to really know. I think a lot of times on live, this dungeon is very much hold W. There's a lot of pulls that are standardized because the choke points of this dungeon are typically based around very difficult mobs. Some of the most difficult mobs, the Stewards, they end up putting multiple amounts of magic dispels out. They take on you for an insane amount of damage. There's some Banshees, if you go towards the Derelict Duo first, that are really dangerous. There's a Behemoth as well. If you go towards Derelict Duo, that's very dangerous. If you go to this left side, like you're seeing from both Polish Mountain and Sinspell with the Apex links, that can actually stop you. There's also a big Lasher. He puts a group-wide dot onto players. And so the stopping points tend to be at those very challenging mobs. How big are Sinspell and Polish Mountain going to go here?
Yeah, that is the question. Both of these teams are still gathering their runs. I just want to give a quick update, because between those two runs, I got a message from Sky, which is the tank on Sen Spellbook, saying, by the way, we beat Polish Mountain here, and elaborating on how they did it with their pull cadence, which we also already talked about. And I said, can you please tell your team to fix their internet? To which I received an XDDDDD. So I just wanted to share that one with the class. But yeah, it was still going for Sen Spellbook as they're gathering everything here. We're on our way to this very big Lasher that you were calling out. It's been marked as well, and they're still going, Kettles.
Yeah, so this makes sense. If you're not going to wipe, you're going to want to pull this into the boss room for the reason that Ember Dawn has some spawn arm time RP. It tends to be around 15 seconds, but you're going to want to pull all the trash into the boss room. That way, once you end up downing some of the scary mobs, then you're able to pull the remainder of the mobs into the boss for funnel. And for Sin Spellbook, look at this. They are just full sending it straight into Ember Dawn. And this is what I was talking about whenever we were initially talking about who should have the advantage in this dungeon. Sin Spellbook, they should have a lot more practice in this key, doing very dangerous strats on multiple compositions, because they were trying to feel out their spec variety rule coming into the weekend. And they are, what is this? 45 seconds ahead already of Polish Mountain. Bloodlust has been pressed on Ember Dawn. It looks like both teams are on that same Bloodlust on the first boss lifestyle with a bunch of trash, but the fact that they've opened up a 45-second lead is a humongous deal.
It absolutely is. You can now see Polish Mountain also arriving at Ember Dawn, but of course, they finish off a pull before that. While they are getting here, Ember Dawn is sub 50% for Sen Spellbook, and their lust is still running. Not only were they able to get here faster, they were also able to get that lust on cooldown just a little bit quicker, which can sometimes be relevant in these MDI dungeons. The faster they are, the earlier you want to press that lust to get it back towards the end of it. And with the gathering of such a big pull in such a large dungeon like we're seeing here in the Windrunner Spire, makes a lot of sense to try and get it on CD as quickly as possible, while also trying to get a really useful lust as well. Since Spellbook has finished all of their trash, You can see that they're clocking in at 37.9%. Polish Mountain is going to be a little bit over that due to the fact that they did a 2-tap on the polls.
Yep.
But it's not significant enough that I don't think you wouldn't prefer Send Spellbook's route, right?
Well, it kind of depends on like where is the count coming from, right? If it's going to end up coming from bad mobs, we'll call the stewards bad mobs, right? If it's going to come from mobs that slow down your run, there's a chance that Send Spellbook ends up having to do like an additional half pull where they end up killing off some mobs and then they do like an elongated chain here where Polish Mountain are maybe able to pull all the way through. That's the way that Polish Mountain would be able to catch up. Conventional wisdom would say that with this count differential, the 7% is probably not going to add a full additional pull, and Send Spellbook might just be one pull faster than Polish Mountain are. And Polish Mountain have now downed Ember Dawn, and they are 20 seconds behind. How do you catch up 20 seconds in this Windrunner Spire is the question for Polish Mountain fans.
It absolutely is. But there's a couple more giant pulls that you can be doing, and we know that that is a Polish Mountain given.
What is Jura doing? Jura is going and grabbing.
He's not there, yeah. He was going straight.
So he's grabbing the movement speed tome, but what is he going to do with it is my question.
Let's see.
He's not even grabbing the movement speed tome. What is he doing?
You trying to Wurnstone somewhere?
Why?
Yes, this is a great question that I also asked
Four-player
myself.
meld skip. Look at that. All the melds have been used, and now Jura is positioning himself in the dungeon to be able to port to the rest of the team. So they actually did a massive skip on some of those dangerous Banshee mobs. And that's how they get that Auga Booker through. That is that half pull differential. I didn't know if it was actually going to change the pull cadence, but now Polish Mountain, we thought they were behind, but now they're half a pull ahead.
Call an ambulance, but not for me, is what they just told us as they arrive on the Derelict Duo in an absolute insane way to pass through this dungeon. We were staring at Jura, kind of like, now do something, but it all makes sense. Now, the one thing I will say is that they, of course, also still need to make sure they're good on count. They had a little bit of extra going into Ember Dawn, which will make up for some of it, but I assume we still need a little bit of extra somewhere else as well. You could see the difficulty level for Send Spellbook is now a lot bigger due to everything they have on Derelict Duo, those cutthroats. They add a lot of extra damage with the poison, and then you also need to deal with that Woebringer, does that shriek. It's just not nice to have on there as well. So lots of extra damage, which also means Reuben won't be able to do additional damage to help out the team. So both of these teams trying to deal with those bosses, but Polish Mountain pulling up ahead.
That is a sick recovery, and now they're, what is this, 10 seconds ahead maybe on the Derelict Duo? That was so cool to just see. But for Polish Mountain now, they have to keep their foot on the gas. Their count is looking a little bit suspicious. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know where we're going to make up this this amount of count that's not going to cost us also half a pull. Maybe we're seeing a game of slingshot here, Mix, where, you know, the Polish Mountain, they accelerate, and then they slow back down because they have to do an additional half pull, and then since Spellbook has to do an additional half pull, then the Polish Mountain's able to accelerate again. I'm not loving the count situation here, but this is very, very close between these two teams.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to, right? Our count is still very much favored towards Send Spellbook, and the boss percentage that currently Polish Mountain is leading does not make up for that. We'll need to see what they do to get it back together, but we can only wait and see to try and figure that one out. Tettles, you seem to have an idea.
I have an idea. So what we've seen from this dungeon before, Send Spellbook played the Windrunner Spire on Friday. We saw that. What they do on this next pull, at least against Firmawand, was very slow. They ended up breaking up this next pull into two separate pulls. If Polish Mountain is able to grab all of this trash and pull it straight into that third boss area, I would not be shocked if there is a significant time gain here. In Polish Mountain, now they're actually looking to fight some of those Woebringer mobs that they left in the dust earlier. They're pulling him into the Phalanx Breaker. How far is Polish Mountain going to go? Because that is going to determine how I feel about this route. It looks like we're making a pit stop here on top of this Woebringer. We're going to let these breakers gather. And for Send Spellbook, they actually run pretty far towards that third boss area. I would not be shocked here if Send Spellbook is going to be somewhere in the order of 20 to 30 seconds ahead off of this route.
Yeah, so the one thing with those breakers is that they're just a little bit clunky in how they pass. They can get stuck
Yep.
in places. The archers are not nice to move. So what teams are doing is utilizing the corner that you can see here, marked by Moon on the right-hand side for Sin Spellbook. But Polish Mountain has
Wow.
also
So-
picked up one of those corners, but it looks like Pankish is on the way, Tettles.
This is bad for Sin Spellbook. They actually are playing a smaller poll than they did on Friday. I think that their strategy has changed just a little bit, and Polish Mountain have the advantage here. There is a more aggressive chaining of the mobs, and Sin Spellbook look to be around 5 to 10 seconds behind, just in terms of dungeon progression, how they are moving their characters through the dungeon. And Polish Mountain, they're grabbing the Mystic. Are they going to grab the second Mystic? Oh my God, we're doing 2 Mystics.
Wow.
This is so much damage. So these Mystics, they have a Flame Nova AoE cast on top of the Spectral Axe Thrower's Throw Axe Bleed that goes onto all of the players. Every single defensive is going to be coming out. All offensive CDs need to be pressed, and you are on a timer to be able to kill off this pack. There is a lot of CC that you also want to press to be able to reduce the amount of damage that's coming out of the Axe Throwers. At the same time, those Flame Novas, there's no way of mitigating that damage outside of like Zephyr and Anti-Magic Zone. Ooh, a really good Soothe by Jura on that Augmentation Evoker with that Overawe being talented to de-enrage the entire pack, making tankiers taking less damage. And Polish Mountain, their entire team is so low HP. Koma and Jura are both low.
Tankiers?
Tankiers had 5% HP.
Jura?
Hits the 4 brute. Is he going to live? Jura is also dropping low, presses that
Sweet.
scales, and it looks like Polish Mountain are going to be able to pull off this pull. Wow.
A lot in this poll all comes back to how you're going to be able to deal with those mobs. You need that massy C. Everybody's dropping low once more. Yitzhak cannot survive this as the Throwax comes down on him. Battle Res is back up, but that's 15 seconds against the clock that they will need to figure back out. And since Spellbook, like you're saying, they're in fight with the boss as well.
Yeah, they got the Mystic killed off quicker. The chain, it was cool from Polish Mountain, but they didn't get the Mystic killed off in time to spawn the boss. It just took a lot longer to be able to DPS down a more challenging pull with those archers and those mobs that were trickling in really, really late. And for Sin Spellbook, a slightly slower but more controlled strategy allowed them to get the boss spawned earlier. A 15-second penalty in terms of death is now in favor of Sin Spellbook, and I feel like they're somewhere in the order of 25 to 30 seconds ahead. Now things have slingshotted back in the favor of Sin Spellbook.
I fear I'm going to need a checkup on my heart after this series. I'm not sure I can take it. Look at that. These teams are neck and neck. 100% on the side of Polish Mountain, but Sen Spellbook will get there as well in just a couple of seconds. And we will see both teams just race the timer. Look at the boss percentages. There's basically no big difference. The only difference maker is that phase that Polish Mountain was still dealing with. It might come down to whether or not a team need to play an additional phase of mobs on Commander Kroluk here. That can be a big time save if you're able to skip one of those.
Okay, first off, I don't think you can skip that. That would be ridiculous. But you would have to kill it for like
Wow.
35% to 0 or something like ridiculous. Which they did get 10% off the boss, so I'll never say never, but I would be very surprised. We'll just leave it at that. I mean, for Polish Mountain here, you're basically hoping that somebody dies on Lust. Like you're hexing them in the chat, right? The Polska Gurum guy, he's out in force, passing a hex. And that's basically what you're hoping if you're Polish Mountain. If they lose somebody and they lose them on their offensive CDs, I think that the ability to be able to win it for Polish Mountain kind of opens up. As it currently stands, I feel like Polish Mountain is just sitting there watching Sin Spellbook down the boss. They have their Bloodlust available. Their Demon Hunter has his Void meta, so you are allowed to lust on pull here, and it is just this final boss that is going to send Sin Spellbook into the finals and send Polish Mountain home.
Potentially, yes, we'll need to wait for that final boss to actually conclude to make that final call, but the 15 seconds definitely hurt them on paper right now. The big factor in why Polish Mountain was so much slower here is the fact that it was Yitte who went down, who, if you know anything about the Devour Demon Hunter, that class is all about staying alive and racking up stacks to then use them to deal damage, and once you die, it just completely gets reset. Means it hurts even more than any of the other classes who go down because you don't have real CDs, but also every single time you die, you're just in trouble and you lose so much damage. But
Yep.
both of our teams electing to use that bloodlust right out of the gate. Look at that, since Spellbook are zooming Restless Hard, going closer and closer to those 50% markers. They need to make sure they're staying clean here. A single death could potentially turn favors back to Polish Mountain.
I mean, can you do 20% more damage? Is that possible, or do you think there's a death that is required here to even things up as well?
I think it depends. If you lose your Demon Hunter, for example, you just lose so much damage as well.
Okay, that's
And
true.
it could matter.
It's the restless
If
heart.
you lose your DK right after he sent army DT, it could also matter, right?
So
So
spellbook.
just a death alone, I don't think
Actually
is good
helps.
enough. A death right after you pressed your coolies,
Because of the
probably
death.
bad. But since Spellbook are not letting that come to any conclusion, we'll need to hit that Bolt Veil one more time. Looney is hit by that. Blur comes out to just make life a little bit easier here as well. And Meta is running. Damage is popping. We are dropping down to the single digits on Restless Hard. And in a series that couldn't have been any closer or any crazier. Send Spellbook, reverse
Wow.
sweep, and take the victory.
What?
My gosh, I don't even
That's
know.
amazing. Man.
And take the victory.
14 minutes and 30
What?
seconds.
My gosh,
Wow.
Reverse sweep, and take the
15.
victory.
What?
When Murder started.
my gosh, I don't
It's
even know what to
amazing.
say. I think we've all been here just absolutely losing it. Somehow, Sam Spellbook has survived the lower bracket gauntlet and they have made it to the Group A finals. They finally pulled off a run that reflects the team's skill and experience, laying the ghosts of mistakes past to rest and taking this series. Now, while Polish Mountain proved themselves top-tier competitors, which only makes it all the more impressive that Sen Spellbook took on finals, they
Right, in a series that couldn't have been any close and take the victory. Any crazy here. Send Spellbook, reverse
Wow.
sweep.
The Spellbook go themselves top-tier competitors. Get the Lucas far this weekend. My heart's still going too, but I mean, Hallowed was phenomenal.
Absolute cinema. This dungeon was an absolute banger. And Zyra, you got a replay package for us, don't you?
Yeah, dude. So right at the start here, since Spellbook used Invis pots to skip past a couple of these Restless Stewards here, you can see no Shadow Melts used. They went for just a skip on some of the early mobs just to make this Ember Dawn pull a little bit more clean. We saw different routing strategies for both of our teams throughout the dungeon, and it actually ended up in a big count difference near the end, but this Ember Dawn pull was perfect for Sin Spellbook. They couldn't have done it any better. People worry about the Brewmaster on these big pulls. Can they hold aggro? But Sky was stalwart here. No issues whatsoever. Royven spinning away, doing 150k DPS on the Mistweaver. Both DPS players doing a ton. But we had a little bit of an interesting scenario. I didn't get a good POV of this because both observers were on Yura here. But what I'm assuming happened through looking at logs and understanding what the players' ideas was here, were the other four players ran past all of the trash on the way down. Once they got to the staircase, they ring of Peace behind them, quad Shadow Melted to get that trash off of them, and then Euro Wernstone down. So Polish Mountain went for a different skip of their own. The net result was, after Derelict Duo, they were pretty much even on time, but Polish Mountain had 7% less count and made this pull before the third boss that much more dangerous. Health bars were low the entire pull. Kilmo was nearly tapped on mana. We did say Yite died right near the end of this pull, and it was actually right after he hit his meta. He was almost in his immortal mode, but he just barely bled out, and that was kind of what sealed it for them. That 15-second gap was all Sin Spellbook needed to send this one home, complete the reverse sweep, and secure their ticket into the grand finals, where they'll be able to play for a spot at BlizzCon. Just an absolute incredible map, a cap to a great series, and huge congratulations to Sin Spellbook. Shelley and Royben, just pillars of the MDI community, always there in some way, shape, or fashion. I love to see them performing this well.
I'm so happy.
Quick note.
Yeah.
I got a message from Royven just like right after the series, and she goes, side note, we on purpose lost that Magisters because we knew they were faster. Just to back up what we were saying. They knew that they couldn't take that one. We could tell, and now we're seeing him come into full force. Now, I will say there's a point in there to be made about if you want to play among the best, you'll need to beat them all. But you gotta also pick your battles, and I think they did really well here.
Yeah, this was a phenomenal, just honestly, strategy back and forth from both of the teams. Banking on, hey, we think they're stronger in this one. Do we think we're going to lose this one? We're going to save these picks. We're going to do them for the middle. We're going to wait until those two, the second map. We're going to wait until the third to bust out the powerhouse. I mean, just honestly, incredible series all around. And as you can see, many of us, almost all of us, minus Zyro, leaned entirely in the favor of Polish Mountain on this one. Chat also was really strongly in their corner, but it just goes to show Sense Spellbook, they pulled off an incredible sweep, and Zyro, yeah, well done. You get that one extra bonus gold star that the rest of us don't. That one extra point. But we'll take a look at the bracket.
Can I say one thing? When I joined the replay channel right after I made that prediction, I said, I don't really think they're going to win, but I just wanted to say something different. But I am glad that it happened that way. I'm really happy for them.
You could,
Nobody would have known.
Secret. You could have been like, I always believed from the get-go.
I gotta be real.
All right. Well, things have shaken out in a very real way for all of our teams as well, and it is amazing seeing the journey we've taken. Now, Tettles, looking at the bracket, we obviously here at the end have Mandatory versus Send Spellbook, but what are your thoughts about Group A and this final showdown coming up?
Well, both of the teams have made it to the finals, so they're making it to our Season 1 finals, which is a really big deal. At the same time, there is a lot of prize money on the line, and I'm interested in continuing to see if Mandatory falters at all. Number 1 seed coming into the weekend, we were trying to look at strategies, we were trying to figure out the metagame, what was going to be happening with Mandatory. I think for me, they have played basically a perfect weekend. Are they going to maintain this perfect weekend?
In this dungeon really leans heavily into that Ogavoker. And
Yeah.
I mean, again, if they're just playing like we expect them to play, a practice team that's been sitting back watching matches, I mean, Mandatory has just been lights out all weekend, and they're continuing that play here, Dennis.
Yeah, I think I would rate the Mysara Cavern strategy and maybe the Nexus Point Zenith, the Ogavoker, facilitates one phasing the Core Warden in combination with another burst DPS spec. So I think that is. I don't think you want to be caught without a Warlock and a Skyreach is probably some of the thought process here. So yeah, start of the dungeon and just basically kill every single other map by just
Let's see.
And it took me
I think at the very end there, but it is not
13
going to
minutes,
matter. Mandatory are going to
24
take this game.
seconds.
It's a 2-0
Nexus
lead that they've
Point
opened up in this series, putting them on match point already.
All it takes is one more win, and Mandatory will prove many of our predictions right. But, I mean, unsurprisingly, when you
See this, that
from
So
Mandatory.
Yeah.
16.
Spellbook wiping at the very end there, but it is not going to matter. Mandatory are going to take this game. It's a 2-0 lead that they've opened up in this series, putting them on match point already.
right? Actually,
Much. And this does mean that Mandatory have another.
Mandatory did it a minute faster than them. Since Spellbook has had a couple of issues in this key as well over the course of the weekend, right? We just saw it earlier today. They had a wipe on the very first pull. They also missed County here earlier this weekend. They're down 0-2 in a series. But they have also reverse swept a couple of series, so I don't want to count them out just yet. It's just kind of all leaning in favor of Mandatory right now, though.
I mean, Mandatory was favored to win coming in. We all expected it, especially with this team, although a lot of these players haven't always played under the Mandatory banner. This new sort of configuration of them here as Mandatory just, I think, immediately looked stacked. And I mean, Dratnos, we're going to have these spec bans coming in, so we'll get a look as they pop up and as the teams take tally of their most played specs, and then also, if there's any ties, pick which ones they're going to ban. So, Dratnos, what are we seeing?
All right, well, we did a fond farewell here to that Vengeance Demon Hunter for Mandatory. 2 Warlock specs also on the ban list for them, although I think we will see the third making an appearance if we make it to that Skyreach. which Mandatory are going to try their best to prevent from happening. Meanwhile, it's 2 Shamans banned for Sen Spellbook. They've also thrown away that Arms Warrior that they didn't even play in the last map. It was just one they played in the first map that they still were then eligible to ban after this one. So what does that mean for what they have access to here? Well, Augmentation Evoker is something that is very much on the cards for both teams, and I expect we will see. Guardian Druid, something that is on the cards for both teams, although I believe if Sen Spellbook use it here, they will lose it for the rest of the series.
Can I make a prediction for Mandatory's composition?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's hear it. Alright. Air Druid, Mistweaver Monk, Augmentation Evoker, Drow Demon Hunter, Unholy DK. That's my prediction.
Yeah,
So brave.
that sounds...
So brave.
It's a
Yeah,
better
that's right. That's right. The fact that they have that entire composition unlocked for the 3rd map is insane to me, by the way.
Oh, I mean, Zyro, we talked about some of the strategies, right? When do you save these picks? Are you going to try and bank on later maps? At this point for Sen Spellbook, I mean, this is where they have to draw the line, right? They have to try to win this. So do you think the teams try to get coy about what they're bringing in, or do you think you just lay it all out with your spec picks?
Nah, you gotta send it out. Like your back's against the wall. You're not a 2. You lose another map, you're out of the tournament. Now you're still qualified for grand finals, but I feel like you gotta give it a go at the last moment here. Go down swinging. Let's see what you got, Sen Spellbook. This dungeon hasn't gone well for them the 2 times they played it this weekend. I want to see what they're capable of. We know they have fast strategies in all of the dungeons. They've got times that could compete with Mandatory. The Pit or Saran looks great. Let's see what they got.
We will see. This is going to be the make or break game.
That are being left alive for them, but they are only a handful of seconds behind.
Okay, let's watch. I
A little
guess.
bit for the first time this weekend. So far, it's pretty close here. Both teams are on that Blazing Pyromancer pull that did wipe Sen Spellbook earlier today. This time around, they're doing a lot better job of dealing with it, but it looks like it's going to be Mandatory unlocking the first boss room just a little bit faster here, Dragnos.
Yeah, only a little bit faster though. Sen Spellbook are running right at basically the same pace here. They've killed off the important mob as well. It's just a couple of stragglers that are being left alive for them, but they are only a handful of seconds behind, and they have actually collected a little bit more count in this first area as well. So pretty much dead even between these 2 teams as they're both running into that first boss. And it's actually Sen Spellbook that will be engaging the boss first, while Mandatory wasting a little bit of time here, or using a little bit of time here, gathering up all these enemies, setting up a beautiful AoE death pile here for all of their cleave to destroy this pull.
Look at the strategy here for Mandatory, though. Kush and Maestian actually both grabbed a 10 stack of that buff from clicking the crystal before heading into the pull, which means their initial AoE on this pack was a lot higher than it was for Sen Spellbook. They had a little more setup time, though, that was required, which means Sen Spellbook actually were able to get a little bit ahead on boss damage here, but I believe Mandatory should be catching up and pulling ahead here as they'll have that damage buff uptime longer. It doesn't extend the buff, right, but it still means they have the buff for a little bit longer.
Right, each stack of this buff, it's sort of like Iron Fur, right, where it's each new stack will have its own unique duration, so you won't refresh your old stacks, but you do still get the benefit of multiple stacks. What you really want to make sure is that you just have as many as possible during your burst. Other than that, it's not as big of a deal whether you have 6 for some time and then 18 and then 6 at the end, or just 18 for a shorter time, as long as that 18 does cover your full burst.
Look at this, though. We're actually getting a little bit of extra count pulled on top of the boss at the final moment here for Sen Spellbook, whereas Mandatory just are now dealing with only that Magister. So a little bit different count between the 2 teams. Sen Spellbook also had about 1% more before heading into the boss. Looks like they're going to be leaving the boss with a couple percent more than Mandatory. We'll have to see what that ends up changing for them later on in the key. Mandatory will have to pull an extra mob or 2 here and there. Either way, it's still going to be very, very close. Let's look at this. Both bosses exactly on 10% at the same time between the 2 teams.
Yeah, and the count almost exactly equal. Again, Sen Spellbook, 2% of an advantage on count. And Zyro, they're going to be killing this boss, I think, just a little bit ahead of Mandatory. This is a really impressive performance. No, it is Mandatory who get it by 2 seconds on the first boss. Although Sen Spellbook looks like maybe even getting in combat a little bit quicker as they were already by the exit. A bunch of worms being pulled by Sky, and then charging forward are both tanks for each team. Very dangerous section here for your tank. These mobs absolutely demolish a tank. Mira's already using the bark skin on the gather here, whereas Sky is able to hold that until actually getting in full combat, actually even getting the Incarn rolling first. Mira is waiting on pressing Incarn until everything is grouped up here.
Look at this. Maystine taking both crystals on his cooldown so he can do a majority of the damage, and then those worms are going to come in late and buff the entire group. Since Velvet opted to split the buffs between Dan and Looney, so they have a little bit more even damage across the board, but it's working out really well for...
Actually even slightly ahead on Trash, although Sense Spellbook do have some still under the boss and incapacitated over to the side that they will presumably be gathering later. So depending on how efficient they are able to do this boss, it might still work out okay for Sense Spellbook. I do think that means that Mandatory have a dungeon advantage, though, that has clearly developed over the past couple of minutes here. Jamella's boss damage, though, is a huge point of divergence. Even just the RNG of whether you're able to maintain, 2, 3, 4 target cleave efficiently for longer can be a big deal on a boss like this.
I do think the Demon Warlock actually outperforms the Devourer on this boss, unless you get really, really good overlaps with Gentleness where they kind of all start to float in the same direction. Your Imps AoEing these jellyfish doesn't really matter where they are in the room, right? They can just passively cast at all of them. So, I mean, look at Looney's damage here. He's absolutely cranking on this boss, so I think Sense Spellbook should make up a little bit of time here. But, I mean, 50% of a boss's HP is a lot of room to make up, especially since you're running out of dungeon at this point. Just a little bit of trash count and one boss between the end of the tournament for Mandatory. So Sense Spellbook, I think at this point, they need a mistake out of Mandatory. Bad news, though, this team just doesn't seem to be able to make any mistakes, Ratnos.
Yeah, this is so impressive out of Mandatory. There have been MDIs before where teams have looked perfect. This is going to be another one of them. Mandatory are having a weekend to remember here. This is so incredibly impressive, and there's only 4 minutes left in this dungeon for things to change in favor of Sense Spellbook. But all eyes on Mandatory now as they charge upwards, up the spire towards the last boss here. It's going to be one more big pull, and then they'll basically be on that last boss pull. So really not a lot left that could go wrong here, although I've found a lot of ways for these pulls to go wrong in my personal testing, of course, to learn all the things for the casting here.
This can go wrong, right? There's a lot of passive AoE damage. Obviously, the Void Terrors are a threat if a Terror Wave cast goes off. It could fear the whole group. That cast got a little too close to finishing, but Gingy had the kick for it, so Mandatory's not going to go down this time around. Mira's doing a good job staying alive. Incarn is active once again, so he's not really in any major danger, even though that Healing Absorb does go out on him. Quickly healed off by Ryson there on the Mistweaver. And another AoE pull down, another perfect execution pull for Mandatory here. The only thing between them and the end of this dungeon, Dratnos, is one little skip up, which we're going to see from a Devourer Demon Hunter shift up to the platform, and then we could get a rescue chain plus probably a Wormstorm as well in just a moment. They're also going to be pulling a little bit of this trash upstairs. They're going to be pulling the Void Terrors manually. They'll DK grip them up, and then the Hollow Soul Shredders will Shadow Step up as well. They've got the trash count ready. Now they can pull it up to the final boss, potentially the final boss of the tournament here. Mandatory just once again on an absolute tear in this dungeon.
Yeah, Sense Spellbook are going crazy on the right-hand side as well. They're on a zero-death run too, and they are setting up an even larger pull than Mandatory did with that Guardian Druid Sky just charging to the end of the dungeon. Actually going to be grabbing the Tyrant and the Void Caller here that Mandatory expended so much efforts to avoid. Very dangerous enemies, but it looks like Sense Spellbook are sending the Spellbook here. They are charging up to the last boss as well with all of this trash. If they can live this pull, it will be so impressive, and even still, it might not be enough, but they are going to be grabbing the boss here as Mandatory just nuking this down already at 100% count. They can just focus on that single target. There won't be an opportunity for Sense Spellbook, but Sense Spellbook are really giving themselves every opportunity. They are going to have the first death of their run, though, and of this map for either team. It is going to be a battle res. It is just the Evoker, but that is quite a bit of damage lost. Luckily, it was before the Breath of Eons that death came out. Unluckily, though, there's still a lot of trash here, and also Zyro, our tank, is now running out of defensives, and there is still a Tyrant that is going to be applying that heal absorb.
No. The fear goes off.
Spellbook. That's going to be a wipe and a reset. But let it never be said that Sense Spellbook lacked ambition here. They absolutely went for it to try and win this map. What an impressive attempt out of them. It almost came together. It was almost enough to try and stabilize and bring this to a game 4, but mandatory are just playing perfectly. They are not going to offer any opportunity for a team to bring them past the minimum number of maps in any of these series. It's going to be a 3-0. It's mandatory absolutely dominating this weekend.
Just unbelievable gameplay. The only other time I think I've seen any pull like that going up to Genitris was in my Mythic 0 runs earlier in this expansion. But then we would wipe on purpose and have a little engineering totem down to res us. Either way, hats off to Spellbook for going for the pull, giving us a little entertainment at the end. But the win and the victory and the glory is for mandatory as they take the first place prize in Group A. They are our champions. But we'll be seeing both of these teams later this month in the grand finals. Will be a sight to see for them.
Right, that's gonna be
We will,
all
and I cannot wait.
of the games.
Device and
Like,
strategies,
there's a
your
little
look
bit
super automatics.
of replay
Again,
here.
First
the
prio
right,
bans
and-
healers because they're
Yeah, that's basically gonna be MDI International Group A finals.